guys, Melania with Stone Fetic here. As you can see, today we are making an outdoor countertop table.
Last year, I made a video showing how to make outdoor tables for a cabin in the woods using epoxy. I received a lot of questions from that video, so I'll answer those questions here. I will also report back on how those tables have held up to the sun and snow so far. For this year's project, the client has an outdoor area that they wanted to spruce up. They have a glass table that they are using currently as their counter space. We will need to make a counter for them that fits over the existing top.
As you can see, I have the template for the outdoor kitchen island out right here across the two sheets that we'll be cutting it on. I added an extra 1/4 inch to all sides. Now this should make for a slightly tighter fit around their outdoor grill than it normally had, but I think that it should work fairly well. It's also good to ensure that it actually covers over the previous island that they had, since they wanted it to just fit over rather than it just being an exact fit and then it just resting on top, which wouldn't work as well. So now that I have it here and I have the lines all laid out there, I will now be getting our straight edge and our circular saw to just cut up all the edges just quickly there.
I'm tacking down my straight edge with a nail gun, then cutting out the countertops area with a circular saw.
Okay, so now that we've gone over it with the circular saw, it left just a little bit. Since, of course, the blade is circular, it hasn't cut all the way through here. And if we wanted it to, it would risk overcutting into the countertop itself. So what we're going to need to do in order to remove that last little bit to get this to come off, we're going to need to take this jigsaw here. With its thin, precise blade, we're just going to have to go and cut along inside here and here. Of course, not facing this way, it'll be facing inwards, in order to get that little bit of wood off.
Now that our counter is seamed together, I go over and glue all the edges onto the counter using wood glue and clamps to keep it in place. It's important to then go over with Bondo and fill any gaps that were left. Now I sand it smooth and router the edges. Red guarding the underside is important for outdoor tables to keep any liquid out that may leak in from snow or rain. I also primed and painted the underside so it doesn't look red. Texturing the edges helps the pattern look cohesive through the counter. I do this by using a lot of different colors of spray paint. Now it's epoxy time. I pour out the epoxy onto the surface. Half of it has been colored with coffee metallic and the other half with pearl. I poured and chopped my epoxy so that it would form a gradient effect going from the outside in. Putting down puffs of black spray paint and fracturing it with metallic isopropyl alcohol mixture adds another layer of visual texture on top. I ran some pearl epoxy and some black and silver spray paint through to make small veins appear in the same direction as the striated lines. Then I grabbed a heat gun and opened up the veins and made them a bit more wavy.
In between coats, what we need to do now that we've done the initial coat with the pattern is we get our sander here and we just go over the top of it with 220 grit sandpaper and we just sand everything evenly. However, we're not going to be doing that with the sides. With the sides, we get a regular sheet of sandpaper and we just do that by hand, since if you do that with a sander, both on the edges and on the flat side itself, you might accidentally blow out all the way to the base wood rather than just keeping your nice epoxy design. You don't want that. You don't want to have to go back and patch in the repairs and try and make it look cohesive with the pattern that you already have. So just to avoid that, just lightly sand by hand with 220 grit sandpaper on the edges. That should be good. And as always, make sure that when you're using a sander like this, make sure to wear earmuffs and a filtration mask.
Sometimes when the epoxy flows over the edges, it doesn't keep the vein intact, so to keep the look of real stone, I go over the edges afterwards and lightly touch up anywhere that the pattern of the vein doesn't remain on the edge. I also sometimes do this if there were parts where I wanted the vein to look a bit more dramatic or to look more consistent with the rest of the vein. Then put a clear coat on top to seal everything in and make it food safe. A lot of you were asking about how it works to keep this countertop outside and how I combat yellowing. For the clear coat, I use Stone Coat Countertop's Art Coat epoxy. This epoxy is more UV resistant, so I use it with my outdoor projects. And now for the moment of truth. Will it fit?
Look at that. Nice. Like a glove. Wow.
This was a really fun project to do. As you can see, we managed to match the pattern both to a bit of the floor outside as well as to the trees that are surrounding the area. Well, I had a lot of fun with this product. What do you think of your countertop now that it's been installed?
It's absolutely amazing. It exceeded any expectations that I had. It truly brings out the entertainment area that we have back here and matches perfectly. I love it. Lauren?
I absolutely love this. This is way better than what we had.
And not just from an aesthetic standpoint, from a functional standpoint
Yeah.
too, because what we had before, I mean, this is built on top of a bar top table, and it had the tempered glass on the top, and it was such a pain to clean.
Yeah, to keep clean. And this is so much easier just to wipe down, and it looks perfect with just a cloth and water.
It looks
Easy.
like a single piece of stone. It's amazing. It truly
Yeah,
is. We
it's
love it.
so cool.
I mean, we've only had it for a couple minutes, but we love it. I can envision having everybody over, sitting here and entertaining on it, firing up the hibachi, and having a really good time with it.
Yep, and just coming out here for breakfast and just pouring a cup of tea and enjoying, the mornings that we have before it gets so hot in the summer. And
Yeah.
So thank you.
So thank you very much. This is incredible.
Oh,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome. It
Thank
was
you.
a blast.
Good.
It was fun coming out here.
So
Be able
great.
to do this for you guys.
And the guy that we had on the video with us, Marshall, the one I did the counter for, he's also a small business owner here in Las Vegas. And I always like to help support other small business owners in the community. His business is here. It's called Club Jerky. And what they do, they have a monthly box service where you can get jerky shipped straight to your door. And it comes with a variety of accessories in addition to the jerky, such as these sort of cup cozies that have their logo on it. There's this really nice board for where all your jerky can go on, or you can use it as a cheese board afterwards. And I really liked the jerky that he gave us to sample. The pumpkin spice one, surprisingly, was very delicious. Didn't expect pumpkin spice to taste so good on jerky, but it worked. It really worked. So go ahead, give him a try if ever you want some jerky. Hello, and now is the part of the video that you've all been waiting for if you've been wanting the Q&A section. Okay, so Nancy Walter says, I was told epoxy yellows outside. Yes, to a certain extent, epoxy does yellow outside. However, we do the arch coat over the top, which is more UV resistant, which means it yellows less over time. It still may yellow a little though, which is why we tend to stick to earth tones whenever we're doing outdoor kitchens or outdoor tables, because it's less noticeable when it yellows. Captain Crunch 359 says, what boards did you use? We use MDF boards. Usually for the thickness of the countertop, it's 3/4 inch. Randy Camplin says, what about using real wood in weather that can exceed 20 in Canada? As your video is in the States, which most of the states don't see this type of temperature, thanks in advance. Ooh. A few different things about that. One is, you're right, we are in very different climates. We live in Nevada here, which is very much the opposite. It's usually a lot hotter. So I don't recommend real wood. By real wood, I don't mean wood-like materials such as MDF, or in the case of MDF, materials that have been made out of composted bits of wood, kind of repurposed. I mean like acacia, oak, various slabs of just solid wood I wouldn't recommend, as they can be susceptible to warping. Additionally, I do not recommend doing a river table outside. The epoxy is too thick on that, and it may crack or cause some other issues because the epoxy is much thicker. Most of the tables that we do, it's a very thin layer that goes over MDF, so it doesn't cause as much warping. Brian DLT says, do you epoxy the bottom also with a clear coat, or does the Red Guard and Kills protect it from the elements? Red Guard does protect the underside. That helps to keep all the water out. Various weather elements, does a pretty good job as being a solid layer. The Kills isn't to protect it. The Red Guard already does that well enough. It's just to paint the underside because Red Guard is very bright red, and I don't want anyone happening to look under there and think, oh my gosh, this is just too much. It's just a nice, Kills is just a nice thing so that I can coat the underside so it looks more visually appealing. You don't need to epoxy the underside. The Red Guard does a well enough job at sealing it. In future advance, if I mispronounce your name, I might mispronounce this one. I'm very sorry. I do try my best. Janicia Morrow, when you mentioned summer heat, how hot were you considering?
We have experienced 122 degrees here. Last year's tables that we did experienced below freezing temperatures and snow directly on the tables. It had a high of 94 degrees Fahrenheit. This year's outdoor kitchen here in Las Vegas had a high of 117 as the highest. So summer heat can affect epoxy curing. It can cause it to cure much faster than it normally would, but it's still manageable and it still seems to hold up fine with the heat. Eric the Yeti says, I really enjoyed this video. Fascinating. How long will that epoxy last in the sun? We checked back on the tables. It's still good. A year later, they're happy with them. Still holding up really nicely. No noticeable yellowing so far. If you want to try a similar project yourself, you can come to my website. We have an online community for creators and artisans just like you. We have a ton of different supplies for art projects, crafts, and more. We have a ton of epoxy additives also in our shop, and tutorials in our blogs to guide you every step of the way. So feel free to stop on by. Make sure to like, comment, and share with your friends. As always, built by you, built for less, built to last, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.